Super. Thank you all for being here. I'm Maria Bernier. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the State Data Coordinator for the Connecticut State Library. And today we are going to talk about your state annual report data, how you can use it, how you can use many of the customizable charts that are available to you and tweak them a little bit for your own purposes and put them into your own reports when you're talking to your funders and your stakeholders. So that's why we're here today. Feel free to ask questions as we go along because this is for you. They pay me to help you and it's a fun job, but I need to hear from you guys what your questions are and what you need so that I can help you out. So I always like to start these webinars with a little bit of information about the state annual report and why we ask the questions we do and what we do with that information. It really includes a lot of questions that are provided to us by the Institute of Museum and Library Services for their nationwide public library survey. And those are questions that pretty much every public library in every state and territory across the country are answering. And we're really trying to make sure that we are comparing the same information and comparing apples to apples across the states and the whole country. So that's why some of those questions are the way they are, because they come from IMLS and we're stuck with them. But we do have the opportunity in each state to add some of our own questions, and we absolutely do that in Connecticut. And now you can tell in the annual report form, there's a tiny little abbreviation, so you can see which ones are national questions and which ones are Connecticut questions. So that's a little bit more transparent than it has been in the past. But we also take this data and IMLS does what IMLS does with it, and they throw it into sort of a nationwide picture of what's happening in libraries. But in Connecticut, we can really drill down into some great details and use some charts that my predecessor, Tom Newman, put together and really crunch that data and crunch that information in helpful ways for our own local advocacy. So that's really what we're talking about here today. We will be spending a lot of time on our annual report LibGuide. It's a whole statistical LibGuide, and that's the URL, which you do not have to write down because I'm going to send you that URL in an email a little bit later today, which is also where you will find the recording for today. So that's all going to come to you in an email. But that LibGuide includes our most recent annual data, which we call the statistical profile of Connecticut Public Libraries. So we'll take a look at that. And you can also find on the LibGuide the most recent annual report form and instructions and definitions, which we're not going to talk about today because that's a whole nother webinar that you can come to later on this summer. Also on our LibGuide, there are some fabulous Excel chart and report creators and some fact flyers. So let's pop on over to that, that particular LibGuide. Let me escape from here, hop on over. And actually, I want to start here with our DLD homepage. And I can blow that up a little bit for you. When we talk about our DLD website or our homepage or our LibGuides, we're talking basically about this entry point here. And you can see that there's a top navigation menu up here, which appears on every single guide and every single page. So you can always find things up here. And our statistics are under services and library statistics right there. So that's one way to find the page we're going to look at. And another option is this sort of top left area where we have links for all of our core programs and services. There's library statistics there. And if somehow you end up on a completely different guide and a different page and you're lost about how to get anywhere, this search box at the top of every page is really helpful. So let's try searching for statistics and see where that gets us. And the very first result is that statistical profile on our statistics LibGuide. So we're going to head over there. And if you are not familiar with LibGuides, we'll do a little tour. All of our guides are detailed. They are rich. They are deep. and comprehensive. They're like reference books in themselves because we're librarians, right? So I have smashed all of my information into this LibGuide so that you can find it in one place, but that means it's pretty complex. So with our LibGuides, we have multiple sort of tabs or pages within the guide, and those are those green tabs right here near the top. So there's a few different things, a few different pages within our LibGuide on statistics. And then on each page within a box, we can have additional tabs within a box, right? So there's layers upon layers here, and it gets a little complicated about what's actually where. So starting with our statistical profile, that's where we're really going to delve in today. This is really the really deep and rich data set from each year. So this is where all of the answers to all of your annual report questions end up in the statistical profile. And as we go across the page here, this annual report tab, you may be familiar with that. That's where you end up when you are looking for the report form and instructions and changes to the questions. That's under the annual report tab. And then these chart and report creators, we're going to delve into that today as well. Data visualization, this is the same numbers, but displayed in a different way using different software. And I encourage you to play around with those because that's kind of fun too, using Tableau. There's another tab here, finding stats on the web, which is helpful if you are working on a grant application or if you're working on some other kind of data to support what your library does in terms of community demographics or state or nationwide demographics. There are some links in there you can look at. And then flyers and resources for advocacy. We're going to take a brief peek at that, but that's where today's recording will land. So when you are ready to review all of this, you'll find it there. And I'm going to send you that link. But we're going to start today with our statistical profile page within our stats LibGuide. And as I scroll down a little bit, within the box here, you'll see the most recent statistical profile is always front and center, right? That's always going to be the first thing you see here. And if you're curious about some basic numbers from that fiscal year, I pull them together here. If you just need to grab a quick sort of comparison or contextual number for what's happening across the state, those are here, just in terms of total circulation for the fiscal year, percent of e-content. I love this one, that's going up, e-content as percent of all circulation. So those numbers are there. And then if you're looking for data from past years, that's all still here too. So you can find a profile from the past several years. You probably don't need to go back prior to 2010, but if you do, drop me an email and I can probably send you all of the data from that year and sometimes even just your data from that year. So those are these tabs. We're going to start back here with the 2021 statistical profile. And I'm just going to, let me scroll down again a little bit here. It's an Excel file, right? It's right here. And here's some instructions how to use the profile, much of which I'm going to cover with you today, but it's there in text form if you would like to look at it. This right here, PDF of 433 pages, is the entire statistical profile, and it's deadly, and I have to make it for record keeping purposes, but I recommend that you don't use that. And there are some statewide charts here that are actually in the Excel thing. So let's go ahead and open that Excel document right there, and I'm going to download a copy. And I want to reassure you that you are just downloading a copy of this for yourself, okay? You are not messing with the official version online. You're not messing with anybody else's data. So now once I've opened this on my computer, I'm going to make sure that I save it somewhere helpful because any changes I make to it will disappear if I have not saved it. But this is just my copy. So I can do anything that I want and I can delete it. I can undo it. I can throw it away and start over. So whatever you want to do, feel free because this is yours. Now, we always open up on the intro page and you'll see down here at the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet, there are several different tabs here and we'll look at those, but it comes up always on the intro. And as we scroll down, we have, of course, all that identifying information, but here's the introduction. And both this year and last year, there's great big red text on all of the documents that say, hey, you guys, we had a pandemic this year. And you have to consider all of the numbers this year with that in mind, right? Like nothing was normal this year, nothing was normal last year in terms of the numbers that people reported. And so that reminder will remain constant in these documents while the pandemic is still with us and still affecting our services. And there's some additional info here. This year, I was actually able to use the 2020 census numbers for our towns. So there's like real numbers here now for population instead of the estimates that we had been using from the Department of Public Health. So there is a note in the introduction here about how the populations have changed. And you may see in some cases per capita differences that may have jumped a little bit from previous years. And that's because we're working with actual numbers this time. So there's maybe a little readjustment in some of the per capita numbers this year. And then just reminders as we scroll down about how to use the statistical profile. Helpful things again about filtering and sorting, which are always good, and a glossary of some of the terms that are used within the profile. So this introduction is available to you, and it may help you if you need to explain something to your funders. So those definitions are there. Now let's hop over to the totals tab right here. This is just some statewide totals, right, for the past several years. So the most recent year is always here on the right, fiscal year 2021, and then past years here. If you just need, again, to grab a quick number or to grab some comparisons, you can, if you want to see how total library visits have changed over the past several years. Obviously, libraries were closed in fiscal year 2021, and the number went down significantly for library visits. So this gives you a tabular listing of those numbers kind of in one place if you need them. Now let's take a look at the charts. So this third tab, and they are grouped in sort of these rough subject areas. So if you need to pop on down to programs, you can do that, or collections, or the income and expenditures. They're all here in this space. Let's actually take a look at programs and scroll down. So these again are statewide charts showing the picture of what's been happening in Connecticut. So the sort of background context to anything that you're going to be telling to your funders. And here you can see the year down at the bottom and the number of programs and recordings and how that changed over the years. We had been doing so great, right? Like programs were the rock star. They were going up and attendance was going up. And then the pandemic hit and life changed. But we've had some great recovery in terms of online views of those programs. So those numbers are still reasonably in line here. And then as you scroll down, you get a little bit more, just some additional charts about what's been happening with programs and recordings, attendance and views. So again, these are little things that you can use to help tell the story, to put your particular numbers in the context of the larger picture. All right, let's pop over now to the library data tab. And this is the gold mine. This is where all the numbers are. It's huge, okay, right? So there are, how many rows? 196 rows, because there's some sort of top level rows, and then there's a row for every library that submits a report. And then there are 369 columns, because there's a column for every question in the annual report. And then there are some additional columns that are calculated within this spreadsheet for per capita or percentages. And one of them is right here in column I, where we've got square feet per capita. And you see how that's in red text. That means that this particular column has been calculated within the spreadsheet versus these questions in black text that are just the questions from the annual report. So that's sort of a visual cue that you can use to see, okay, what's an actual question I answered and what's something that was calculated based on population numbers or percentages. And that's how you can tell the difference. I also want to, while we're here, my ribbon is collapsed. Oh, let me collapse it. Yep, good. So that gives us a little more room on the screen and you can see a little better. And I want to show you this table of contents right here, because with those 369 columns, how are you going to find the one that you want? Well, you can hop there pretty quickly. If you're interested in interlibrary loans, just click on that link and you see here how it scooted us over to the interlibrary loans section. Likewise, if I want to find out about expenditures, just click on that link and it'll hop me over to the expenditures question. So that's a quick way to kind of navigate through. And if you want to go back to the beginning, just click on buildings and administration, gets you back to the beginning. So that's a handy way of moving around. What else do I want to show you here? Table of contents. These question numbers at the top row, this very top row. I sometimes get lost when I'm in here because honestly, there's so dang many questions that I had to put the question number in here for me, but it helps you guys too. So if you are looking at your annual report form and you say, oh my gosh, that those program questions 2.20A, where the heck are those? Well, let's scroll over to the program section and you can see right up here, those are the question numbers. So if you ever want to do some comparison shopping, you might want to look for the question numbers in the top row there. That's an easy way to get there. All right, we also want to take a look at these rows for your statewide average, the library median, the statewide total, and the number of libraries that report. So let's see if I have any averages. Let's go back to circulation. There may be some averages here. Yeah. So you can see the statewide average is sometimes calculated in this row. There's also often a median, and we've got our statewide totals here, and you can see how many libraries answered this question or responded to it in their annual report. And this is a good time to talk about the difference between average and median. So average is that thing we're familiar with, right? Where you take all the numbers, you add them up, you divide by however many answers there were, and you get the average. Great. But what if there are like one or two answers that are way higher or way lower than everybody else's? That skews your average in one direction or another. And an example might be a library that has an incredibly generous acquisitions budget, right? Like they have money to buy stuff like you would not believe. It's Christmas there every day. But their budget may skew the average a little high than it actually is. So that's when we take a look at the median. And that's just the answer in the middle, right? So if we had 10 responses and they may not be 1 through 10, obviously they're not going to be, right? There may be some 4s, there may be some 5s, there's a 7. So we're just going to nibble in from each end, and whatever answer is in the middle is the median. So that kind of removes those outliers and gets us towards something that's a little bit more common, a more common answer for libraries. So when you are talking with your funders, you'll just want to be careful that you're using average and median in the correct way and using the right charts when you talk to them. So those are those rows. Let's see, we also want to talk about the sort and filter tool. Row 13 here. This is one of the best features of Excel, right? Because you can really start picking your way through the data. So let's take a look at this column, population of service area. Right now, the population, let's see, we can sort it from smallest to largest, right? So the smallest population in Connecticut is cute little Union, 784 people. And if I click on that little down arrow, I can change the sort and do it from largest to smallest. And I come up with Bridgeport with 148 people. Okay, that's great. But what if I want to find something that's like my library, like my town? And that's where if I click on that little down arrow, we can use number filters because this is a number column. So I can do, let's see, let's do between 4,000 and 6,000. Let's see how that works. Yep, so now the filter has done the work for us and it's pulling up the towns with a population in the range that I specified. So that actually helps me narrow down my comparison points a lot better. So I can do that with population, and then I can do it with angelic rank. So maybe I want to go somewhere between 50 and 120. Okay, great. And that helped me narrow down my list even more to more libraries that may be comparable to mine. So that's how you use these filter tools. And when you want to get rid of one, you just click on that little button. You say clear the filter. There, clear the filter, and you can clear them one by one that way. I'm going to put all of our towns back in order because that makes me happy. That library in order, alphabetical. What else I want to show you? County. If we use the filter tool on a column that has a controlled vocabulary, then we can either use these text filters or we can use these sort of checkboxes. And maybe I don't want every single county. I'm going to unselect, and maybe I just want to see what is happening in New London and Middlesex counties. So I've checked those and say, okay. And now all of my results are just filtered that way. So you see how you can use these Excel tools to really bring down the number of results to something that's a little more manageable and useful for you. So that's the filter tool and sorting. All right, the columns here, I mentioned population and angelic and county. Those will be very useful for you as you go through the spreadsheet. The CLA region is one that I just added. And that's helpful, particularly as you're looking for compensation comparisons. So CLA put out some compensation benchmarks recently that are based on CLA regions, so that what they looked at who's making what, excuse me, in terms of salary. And obviously people in Tallinn County have a different benchmark from staff in Fairfield County. So that gives you some comparison points as you were looking at the salaries. All right, I wanted to resort us there. So let's think about some specific data questions. People will sometimes ask me, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I will show you. So if you are interested in the library materials expenditure per capita. So let's click down to expenditures and just take a look as we scroll across here. Expenditures, here's all the questions. And library materials expenditure per capita is one of the things that we calculate based on the answers you tell us. So that's column LQ here, and you can always find who's spending how much per person, per resident on library materials. And again, this is where you might want to sort the data and sort of filter it so you're getting your county or you're getting your population range or your wealth rank. So you can kind of use that as a comparison tool. There is that great question that pops up all the time, and when we've had some chat about it on Contact about which libraries are going fine free, and I love to see the responses on that. And we, as you may know from filling out the annual report, we don't ask that exact question. Is your library fine free? Because that means so many different things at different libraries. And because there are so many places that are 99% fine free, right? Where you may be not charging any overdue or late fees on books or physical materials, except for those darn museum passes or a hotspot or something like that. But effectively, you are fine free. So what we ask instead is the typical book fine and the typical DVD fine. And that is in the income revenue section as we scroll to the right. It's kind of in this purple background here. We ask about typical book and typical DVD. So how do we figure out which libraries are effectively fine free? Let's just say if your library charges 0 for your usual book fine, and if your library also charges 0 for your usual DVD fine, these are the libraries that now that are probably not charging fines for most of their materials. And that list is getting longer. The number of libraries doubled actually in 1 year from fiscal year 20 to 21. So that's a new chart that I've added into the statewide charts section over here. And let me show you that just in case you want that. It's at the very end. So I apologize, but you got to scroll all the way to the end. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling. Here it is. Number of libraries with both book and DVD finds equal to 0. See how that went up? I love, love, love that particular picture. That makes me happy. So there it is if you need it. But I'm going to hop over to our library data tab again, because I also wanted to show you, let me show you also, if I go to home and filter here, no, I wanted to clear all my filters. Let's clear that filter, clear this filter. So I got rid of all my filters. I'm back to my full data set. I want to show you how to use the sort of personnel and salary information. So let's check on personnel. And as I scroll to the right, here's where we're starting to see the hourly rate or salary for specific job titles here. So let's take a look at children's librarians. Say, for instance, you are in this fabulous position where you get to hire a new children's librarian. Maybe you haven't had one before, so you don't know, like, what's the going rate for a children's librarian in my area? I need to be able to advocate for this position to my funders. So I need to be able to give them some realistic sense of how much this is going to cost. So let's say that you know you want a full-time children's librarian. So the first thing you're going to do is use your filter here. And because this is a text column, not a number column, it is a little bit more cumbersome. We actually have to go ahead. Oops, that's not the column I want. We want the hours per week column. Yep, so we want to select all of the libraries that have a full-time children's librarian, which we define as 35 hours per week or more. So we're actually going to have to click all of these things and make sure that we've selected all of them that are 35 hours per week or more. Great. So that narrowed down our list a little bit, but there's still a lot of full-time children's librarians here. So maybe now I want to use my county. And I'm going to check New London County. So that's really shortened my list a lot. So I can see within my area, here are some comparison points for what a children's librarian would get paid. And if you are a children's librarian, or if you're a director or an assistant director, this is also a great tool for you to advocate for yourself if you potentially wanted to get a salary raise, or if you were looking for another position elsewhere, you could get a general sense of what they're paying that position. So this data can be used a lot of different ways. Let me remove the filter on county. We're just going to go ahead and select all. And what if instead I wanted to sort this by between a population range, say of 40,000 and 60,000. Whoops. So a larger town, more of a city. And so now I am looking at a completely different list. These wealth rankings tend to be a little bit higher, meaning the communities may not be as wealthy as other communities. And so now I may be seeing a completely different range of salaries. But that's how you use the tools and the filters here, just to help you work your way through the data. And let me see if I can do that again. Home and no, usually this is here to clear all the filters. All right, we'll clear that filter and we're back to our data. So that's how you would use this information. And then if you say, for instance, let me go back, and we're just going to pick a Fairfield County here. Say you wanted to copy some of this information into another spreadsheet, right? So how would I use this data? Maybe then I can copy the library names here, all of these libraries in Fairfield County that have a full-time children's librarian. I'm going to copy these cells and put them into a new spreadsheet. And I will also copy all of these cells and put them into the spreadsheet as well, so that I have all of that data together in one new spreadsheet. And another option might just be that I use this handy little snipping tool, which I love because it's fun. I'm just going to take a little snip, and I'm not going to get everybody in here just because it's a longer list. But you can use a snip there, save that, and embed that into a Word document or PowerPoint, and you've got all of your data in a tabular way there. So those are some options for sort of how you can take the data out of this spreadsheet and make it a little bit more usable and user-friendly for your presentation. Okay, so that is the statistical profile. And as again, that's the raw data, right? Like all the numbers for every library that reported for 1 year. So that's what they look like for 1 year. Let's go ahead and close that. We're all done with that. I don't want to save it, but I do want to go back to my LibGuide. And I also want to encourage you guys to go ahead and send me chat messages if you have any questions. I'm trying to keep an eye on that chat as we go. So what else do I want to show you here? I got to check my notes. Yep, we looked at that. I'm going to scroll down here. This spreadsheet with public library statistics for the past 26 years or so, this is very cool. Individual library trends over time. This is a great spreadsheet if you are new to your library or new to your position, so that you can see what's been happening at your library over the past several years. Let's take a look at that. And this is a reduced set of data. Like obviously I can't give you all those 369 columns for every library for every year. So it's really narrowed down to 28 columns instead. So it's more of an overview of what's been happening, really top level stuff. And they're all arranged here by fiscal year. And what we're going to do is just use the filter tool here and select our library. And you can see how now I'm just seeing my library and 1 row per year, but I can see how the number of reference questions may have changed over the years. And then obviously there was a pandemic that year. I can see how the number of registered borrowers has changed, but this is where the per capita comes in handy, right? Like look at those good old days of that recession when everybody was coming to the library and we had peak penetration in terms of library cards in our community. And since then, in every community, that number has dropped statewide. So these are some useful calculations just for getting to know your library and seeing what's been happening. So again, that's sort of summary information for each library. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Thank you. We'll go back to our LibGuide. I also want to point out these statistical trends. This is a PDF document that I put together that kind of pulls together some of the various charts from different places and contextualizes them statewide, so you can see what's been happening with public libraries throughout Connecticut. And again, this is helpful for understanding what's happening at your library and what's happening around Connecticut. You can obviously see in that document that program attendance had been going up, but in general in Connecticut for many years, CERC has been going down, visitation has been going down, many questions have been decreasing. So it's helpful to have that information when your funders say, well, wait a minute, your numbers are going down, what's going on? You can say, hey, this is happening statewide and I need some more money so that I can reverse the trend locally. That's my goal. And that will help you support and make your case. These are some statewide trend charts that I pulled together from various places. Those are also useful and interesting to look at. So those are all here, and that's on our statistical profile page. Now I think I want to hop over to chart and report creators right here, this tab. This again is a really fun place. It's fun to open these up and play with them. And you just got to open it and click around and do stuff with it, because there's so much information and so many stories and so many libraries. You just got to play with it in order to see what happens. So on here, again, more spreadsheets, right? Because that's what I have. And Tom Newman set me up with these great tools. So this first one is the chart and report creator for the most recent year. So again, 1 year's worth of information, and you can compare your library with others in a population range or a wealth ranking, or you can pick up to 5 other specific libraries to compare with. So this is great if you want to compare with your neighboring libraries, right? The towns you share borders with. Maybe that's the comparison you want to use. Or maybe you want to find some other specific libraries that are similar to yours in terms of demographics and compare with those instead. So you have the option within this chart and report creator to do that. So that's this very first one. The next one down is looking again at your specific library over time. This is very cool. You don't get to do any comparisons with everybody else, but it's great again to see what's been happening in your community. And again, this is a great visual way of looking at that similar data in charts so that you can see it in a more intuitive way. Great for presentations. And if you're curious about the towns in your group, you can find that here. So let's open this chart and report creator for this most recent year. And again, whatever I do to this is mine. I'm not messing with anybody else's data or anybody else's spreadsheet. You can play around with it however you want. Okay, so you see how when we open it, everything's blank, right? Like there's nothing filled in here. This table is curiously odd. What we need to do is first pick a library here. And I'm going to use Meriden just for giggles. Now you see how here all of this filled in, right? So it filled in Meriden here with our population and our wealth ranking. And it's giving me these great comparisons for specific libraries that may not be near Meriden that I might want to compare with, just in terms of population and wealth ranking. So West Haven, interestingly, maybe I want to compare what's happening in Meriden with what's going on in West Haven because our communities are similar in terms of size and wealth. Or maybe I want to compare with East Hartford because we're roughly similar. Maybe I want to also build New Britain into my comparison. New Haven, now I've doubled the population, and even though we're sort of similar in wealth ranking, that population is going to be significantly different. So I may not want to consider that one. But look at all these others that are still within my range that I might want to use in my comparison library list here. So that's how the table on the right works. Now, in terms of population groupings, you can see in the tiny little print here, there are some sort of default population groups under 5,000, then 5 to 10,000, 10 to 17,000, yada, 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 on up. So if I don't specify any other population, these general charts are going to just show me whatever Meriden's is that is over 50,000 in terms of population. So let's just take a look at that. If I click on that, it'll hop me over to the correct space. Again, here's this tiny little table of contents if you want to pop down to a specific section. But as we scroll down, now you can see the charts. And every chart will be arranged the same in that your library will be first here. Next is a comparison with the average of the cities in your population group, and then the average statewide. So looking at library visits per capita, so per resident. Here's how Meriden stacks up with the comparable libraries in cities with that population and statewide. And program attendance, that similar idea. As we scroll down, reference questions, circ per capita, you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. Again, very visual, very picture oriented. Funders love this, right? Because it's something they can really grasp and understand pretty quickly. So there's a lot here. Many of these charts, they're all pre-populated, ready to go, ready to grab and stick in a document somewhere. What else do I want to show you while we're here? Let's backtrack. I'm going to go back to the input page. See how there's all of these tabs at the bottom of our Excel spreadsheet. So many things happening in this spreadsheet. And once you download it, you can click around and play with them. There's a lot of variety. So that was the general charts, but maybe I find that comparing Meriden with all of the cities that are over 50,000 is a little bit misleading. So maybe I want to pick my own population group, and maybe I want to specify some populations, a wider range around us. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. Yep, that is what I went on. So if Meriden is about 60,000 people, I'm going to go a little bit above and below and then click on my general charts. Great. And you see how they've changed. Now the average is the chosen population range. So the range that I specified, that's what it's showing me in terms of averages. So the charts are a little bit different. So you need to play around with them a little bit, see what's going to tell the story that you want to tell, see what the numbers are telling you, and then figure out what's going to be most meaningful in your presentations. Is it a default population group or is it a specific group? So those are your options there. Now, what if we wanted to do something comparing specific libraries? And in this case, we want to pick our neighboring libraries. So the ones that share a border with us. Wow, and I'm sorry, this font is like really tiny. So I'm not sure you can see it on your end. Hopefully it makes sense for you guys. But my Connecticut geography is not so good. I had to actually make a list of which towns border Meriden, Cheshire and Wallingford. And there are actually a lot more. There's another town, Middlefield, that borders Meriden, but Middlefield compared to Meriden just seems a little unfair in terms of population and wealth. So we're not going to use them as a comparison. We've got a number of other towns we can use. Oops, and I want to go back to Berlin Peck. Okay, so I've picked these 5 libraries surrounding my town, all very robust library services. And now I'm going to click on these comparison charts. And we'll scroll down a little bit. So again, these charts are all arranged the same way, where your library is first, and then each of the individual libraries that you selected as comparison points are here in the same order that you selected them. So if you want to be a librarian nerd like me, you would probably want to re-alphabetize them and put them in alphabetical order. And then at the end, you've got the average of those 5 libraries. And right now, the average will calculate only if you have selected 5 comparison libraries. So if we had gone back and selected only 4 or 3 or 2 comparison libraries, this average would not calculate. And that's a formula I'm still thinking about that I'm going to try and improve for next year. But I got to work my Excel magic on that. So if you want to get an average, make sure you're putting 5 comparison libraries in there. But as we scroll down, you can just see, here's again how my library is stacking up with these others in terms of various usage statistics. Lots of info in here. Circ per capita, circulation, visits per hour. And honestly, there's so much in here. I do encourage you to, like I said, play around with these, try some comparisons, test out what's going on in your library, see what's going to be meaningful for you. Let's pop down to the expenditure charts and see what's going on there. Look how, poor Meriden, right? So these are the ones where I might want to grab some of these charts and put them into a report to use, because these are going to be good advocacy things for me. Yeah, wages and salaries. Oh, wages and salaries, right? So this may be a chart where I want to say, look, you guys, if I am trying to hire a circulation person, I am competing effectively with my neighboring libraries for this specific workforce. And I need to be able to offer my employees something a little bit more so that I can be an attractive employer for them. So those are how you can use those charts. I want to show you how to copy this. So if you wanted to take this chart out of here and put it in a Word document or in a PowerPoint, what would you do? All right, you see how I clicked on it and the edges got these cute little round circles on them. If I right click and copy. So I copied that whole chart. I'm going to take it over to my Word document and I'm going to right click. And you see how these paste options came up? I want the very last one where it's pasting it as a picture. So now it's in my Word doc and I can resize it as an image within the Word doc and not worry about all of these things resizing. Like, it's going to resize itself very effectively. If you do a right click and you try to paste it as something else, it's going to try to come with the data and it's going to come with links and it's going to get messy. So just paste it as a picture. That's the simplest way to do it. And then you can type around it and use the formatting to make it look beautiful. So that's how you would grab it. And the same thing, you would just copy it over here, right click, copy, and then you could paste it into a PowerPoint slide as well. So it's that easy in terms of moving it over to a presentation. But make sure that you are picking the charts that tell the story you want to tell, right? Make it work for you. Let's go back to input. Yep. So these top choices are really comparing libraries. And then there are some options down here for comparing to municipalities. And this is helpful if your library is in a town that has multiple independent libraries. So for instance, Groton has 3 independent libraries and they all send their numbers to me. So cumulatively, in terms of circulation and visitation for the town, we're adding up all 3 of those reports to figure out what's happening town-wide in Groton versus another town like Norwich that has only the 1 library. So they're sending only 1 report. So if you are in one of those towns, you may want to use the bottom section there. All right, I'm going to close this out. I'm not seeing any questions. I hope you guys are still there. Let's go back to our LibGuide. And I want to show you then this chart and report creator, individual library trends over time. So as I said, handy if you're new to your position. Great for getting a sense of what's been happening before you got there. And we will just pick, let's do Avon because I want to show you something. You've got 12-year trends and then 26-year trends. Let's take a look at the 12. These use medians right up there. We're looking at medians. And as we scroll down for this library, the charts work like this, where you've got your library circulation for each year. And then on the right, you're able to see your library circulation compared with similar wealth rankings, similar population groups, and the statewide median. So they'll look the same here. Your library is always going to be in red, and the comparisons will always be the same color. So as we scroll down, again, you can see in your library circulation per service hour, and then in those comparison groups and statewide circ per service hour. So that's how those work. I want to also remind you that you can make changes to these charts in Excel, right? So this one, for instance, maybe you really want to copy this particular graphic into a report, but you'd like to change it a little bit, right? So this is actually going to be more effective. If we go to the chart design menu, this will be more effective. Come back. Let me pin this. Chart design, it should really be a line chart. Line charts are the best for showing changes over time. And because this is really showing 11 years worth of information, it's a lot more apparent now how that circulation per capita has changed over time. So that was just under chart design, and I changed the chart type from a bar chart to a line chart. And now maybe I know that I want to very cleverly use our local high school team's colors. So I am going to change the fill on the line here. And instead of green, I'm going to try and pick that fabulous red that our high school football team uses. Whoops. And I want to grab that whole line. I want to grab the whole line. And sometimes Excel is a little tricky. There we go. You just got to keep clicking until you get it. Okay, and the markers, we're going to change from green to red too. There we are. So now this becomes something that is visually more appealing. So I'm going to right click and copy. And I go back to my Word document or to my PowerPoint. I'm going to right click and then paste it as a picture. Great. So again, now I've got something I can resize. You can change all of this stuff, right? You can change the title here to your library. You can do whatever you want here, right? It's Excel, right? So whatever you do with it, just save it as your own thing. It's ready and it's good to go. Okay. What else do I want to tell you while we're here? Trend charts. Ooh, let's go back to input. Let's take a look at the 26-year trend charts. Oh, look at that. Ha, now we have some information, right? And it's funny, you can see when you a dip like this, often you need to understand the library's history to interpret that. The library at this point was experiencing a major renovation. And I think they were closed for part of the time and the physical footprint was reduced. So it obviously affected circulation during that time period. You can see the dip, that it affected library visits during that time period. So you, as perhaps a new director or somebody new to your position, may see a dip like that. And you might think, oh my gosh, what happened? So dig into your library's history and figure out what might have occurred during those years that would affect your numbers. But you can see like immediately rebounding here, right? Like, oh shoot, there's some construction, but it's coming back up. It's fabulous. It's great how things restore. See, remember, that was what I was talking about over time. This is happening statewide, this percent of residents with library cards. I'm going to keep talking about that because I want people to pay attention to that. Reference questions per capita. Funny how things work out. Sometimes I can see when there is a change in a department head or a director because things get counted completely differently. And that happens frequently where a new person will start the job and they'll get in touch and say, oh my gosh, Maria, I'm trying to do our annual report and I have no idea where they came up with those numbers that they used to send you. And I say, it's okay, go ahead and push the reset button, go ahead and look at the questions, look at the definitions. Let's talk about how that applies to your library. And let's start over with an accurate and consistent answer from year to year that really represents and really responds to the questions that we ask. So sometimes you can see that in the trend charts over time. So if you notice that there is a very steady and consistent uptick from year to year to year to year, that was maybe a director who said, I need to be able to report an uptick every single year to my funders. And then a new person comes and says, whoa, wait a minute, and really rethinks what they're reporting and how. And the numbers change and become maybe a little bit more variable or reset to a different level. But I mean, that is what it is, right? I really appreciate when new people start and pay attention to this and really try to provide me numbers that are both accurate and consistent from year to year. So good stuff. I think, let me see, that may be everything that I wanted to show you. And again, you know, the snipping tool, wherever my snipping tool went, if that's easier for you than a copy and paste, just use that handy little snip, right? There she is, save it and plug it into something else. So a number of different ways where you can take these charts and put them into your own specific reports. Okay, let's go back to our LibGuide. I promise I'm almost done. Lots and lots of links here. please play around and enjoy. Let's go to flyers and resources for advocacy over here on the right. So when we are done today, I'm going to put your recording link right here. So this register is going to turn to recording for March 2nd. And that's where you can come if you want a refresher, or you can watch everybody else's hours if you want to and get their tips as well. My coworker Ashley is doing a new webinar next week on these fact flyers and how to adapt those. So I encourage you to register for that. But we have these, what we call fact flyers in Connecticut, and it's a format that Tom set up and we've adapted. So now there are multiple versions. There's a Canva version, this one here, that you can use. You'll put your own data into it and adapt it however you like. But there's also some versions here in Publisher and these here that I can populate for you using a handy little mail merge and just smush your data in there and provide you with those. So if you think those flyers would be helpful in terms of your advocacy efforts, you can click on it and get a bigger version of it. If you think those would be useful, let me know and I can send you those for your library. But that's where this information lives, is flyers and resources for advocacy. And this is where our recording is going to be. Okay, so I think that is everything from me. I'm going to stick this back up so that you have my contact info. That's how to reach me. We are still working part from home, part from the office these days. So email really is the best way to get me. I do try to check voicemail periodically. Although I forgot completely yesterday, so I apologize if you called me yesterday. I will check it right when we're done here. But that's how you reach me. Please do be in touch. I enjoy hearing from you. And as I said at the top, they pay me to help you out. And it's really fun and it's really enjoyable. So I hope you will. All right, we are done for the day. I'm going to stop our recording. And I thank you all for being here. And I hope you have a fabulous day and afternoon. Take care, everybody.